Drago goes up to the Alpha and turns around to see that everyone has now turned against him, but he continues to attack them, so Toothless commands the dragons to shower it in pain until it can take no more, then goes in for the final blow to take off its horn. The Alpha decides to retreat into the ocean and leaves Toothless as the winner of their fight. All the dragons comes down and kneels to Toothless and declares him as their new king, while all the people of Berk begins reuniting with their lost dragons. Eric comes over to Hiccup, so he offers to leave his father's dragon in his care and he accepts it. Then he heads to Astrid and gives her some love. The elder decides to step in front of Hiccup and officially makes him the new chief of Berk, so everyone begins to celebrate him for all he has done for them. A few years later, we find ourselves at a dragon prison, but a man wielding a flaming sword has come to rescue them. The guard begins fighting the man and throws his lamp at him, but the majestic demon does not burn. It's revealed that Hiccup is inside the armor and the guard backs away as Snotlout comes down to corner him, along with an explosive entrance from Ruffnut and Tuffnut with Fishlegs crashing in from above. The guard tries to run away, but he suddenly gets put into sleep mode by Astrid. They begin to release all the caged dragons, but more guards arrive to get their butt kicked by the dragon riders of Berk. The two lovers tag team all the guards with a little help from their flying dragon, while Hiccup's mom watches from above. After freeing all the dragons, they decide to leave the camp, but Toothless senses something special in a cage before Hiccup calls him over. The best boy begins charging through an army to get to his best friend and rejoin the free dragons in the land of Berk that is now overrun with dragons of all types that lives in peace with Vikings. They land on the island where the captive lizards gets taken care of, while Snotlout starts using maximum riz on Hiccup's mom and goes over to inform him that he's getting a stepdad. A ferocious dragon begins playing with a little one and accidentally knock over many homes, surely sentencing all inside to an early afterlife. Toothless disciplines the foolish creature and Gobber begins to complain that there are too many dragons on the island. But Hiccup tells him it'll be alright as they see one swimming in their food, so Toothless tells it to get the fork out. Gobber advises him to stop looking for problems in the world and deal with some here, starting with getting married to Astrid to rule Berk together, but Astrid leaves the table with Gobber following behind. Eric comes over to them and says that he saw more trappers, but Gobber warns him that one day he will lose. Meanwhile, at the Trappers' Kingdom, the warlords make a plan to deal with Hiccup, but Grimmel enters the room to greet his old friends. He wonders why they've made no progress since Drago's defeat, and they tell him that Hiccup has been stealing their dragons. He begins to leave since he only smokes dragons and not retrieve them, until they point out that the dragons are guarded by a Night Fury. It's revealed that Grimmel is the reason why Night Furies are nearly extinct, and the warlords offers to pay him for capturing the dragon. They prepared a bait for him to use. However, one of the dragons breaks free from its chains and charges at Grimmel, so he no-scopes the creature, then announces that he will take on their job. We head back to Hiccup standing over the land of Berk. He begins to look over the maps that he drew as Astrid arrives to get some alone time with the chief. She tells him that Gobber's right since the entire world now knows about Berk because of their dragons, and that puts them in danger. Hiccup tells her a fairy tale that his dad told him about a land at the edge of the world where dragons live out of reach from humans, and questions if he could move the entire village to the hidden world and create a new Berk. Astrid scolds him for wanting to leave the home his dad left him to protect, but Toothless hears something in the distance and flies off to investigate it. He walks through the forest and sees a Light Fury curled up on the floor, so he silently walks over to her and immediately falls in love, but she seems hesitant. He gets closer to unleash his dragonic riz and captures her heart. Someone suddenly gets her attention as Hiccup walks out the forest and almost becomes past tense. She flies away with Toothless chasing close behind, but he couldn't keep up with her because of his condition. They head back to Berk where Toothless is feeling the full effect of the Great Horny, to a level that can only be matched by 5 Discord mods. Hiccup decides to head back out to go find his friend some Dragusi, but Tuffnut wants to tag along. They walk through the forest with Tuffnut giving Hiccup very wise relationship advice while following close behind Toothless. Hiccup sees something hidden in the forest and picks up a poison dart. He begins getting very suspicious and tells Toothless to remain there while he throws a stick that activates a dragon trap. They head back to Berk and tell everyone that they've been invaded. Eret says that he recognizes that the dart belongs to Grimmel, who is the smartest dragon hunter in the world, and warns them not to underestimate him. Hiccup goes home and begins looking through his father's book, but notices that something is on his roof. He sees that Grimmel is making himself at home in the corner. He starts off by darting Toothless, then goes to have a seat in Hiccup's father's chair. Grimmel starts praising the old chief for hunting down dragons, but is disappointed that he changed his mind and passed for it. He reveals that Toothless is the only Night Fury he hasn't slain and tells Hiccup to hand him over, but he refuses to do it. Grimmel begins to explain that if everyone started to treat dragons like him, the world itself would change drastically, but notices that something is wrong as Fishleg falls out of his disguise. The dragon riders surround Grimmel from all sides and he laughs at their attempts. He whistles to call down 2 dragons that begins to attack everything around them. Grimmel commands Hiccup to give him Toothless when he returns or he'll take everything away from him. As Hiccup goes outside to see that Berk is on fire, Chief Hiccup gathers all the Vikings in the Great Hall. He tells everyone that it has become too dangerous to stay on the island and explains that they must leave to find the hidden world that his father believed in, so they can live in safety and create a new Berk filled with people and their dragons. All the Vikings begin flying away with everything that they managed to carry. Toothless sees his mate in the sky and goes over to her, but she doesn't like people touching her mans and attempts to eliminate the competition. Forcing Toothless to go down and save him from gravity, they head to an island to take a break and decide to make it into their new Berk until they can find the hidden world. Hiccup's mom decides that she will head back to make sure they weren't followed, but advises her son that even if they manage to hide from everyone, eventually someone will find them. In the night, Toothless wakes up because he senses that his bae is close by. She reveals herself, making Toothless happy for some dragoosy. She tells him to follow her and they travel through the camps to make their way through the forest until the best boy arrives at a cliff. She tells him to come over, so the majestic beast goes down to her in style. It's revealed that Hiccup followed them there. He becomes the wingman for his best friend and gives him Riz beyond Riz, but our boy ended up nearly blowing it. Hiccup proves that he has absolutely no game, and seeing that the goofy dance is not the play, Toothless starts button mashing until she stops him and flies up to a tree. He follows after her to the branch and Hiccup tells him to go down on her, but Toothless starts jumping on the branch and breaks it to make a fool of himself. Hiccup calls to him, but he decides to pull out the artistic Riz to draw a very good portrait of her. She comes over to our boy to tell him he passed and flies over the water with Toothless following behind her. She sees Hiccup hiding in bushes and heads off, but sadly Toothless could not follow after her. They go back to the village where Hiccup decides to build him a prosthetic that Toothless can control by himself. He makes sure it's fireproof, then goes to install it on his dragon. Seeing that he's no longer disabled, he thanks Hiccup before going off to take his first flight by himself in years. Toothless flies through the sky until he finds his bae in the clouds. She leads him on a trip into a massive storm and shows him how to camouflage, but Toothless can't seem to copy her. So he decides to channel all the lightning around him to disappear, but this drains all of his stamina. He continues to follow her above the clouds to show her some love, then heads down to enjoy the beauty of the world together. Meanwhile, Toothless' mom flies through the clouds and sees that there are many ships heading towards them. She begins getting attacked by Grimmel's dragons but manages to escape because he called them back. She hastily returns to their main camp and tells them that Grimmel is tracking them with a fleet of ships, and Hiccup decides that they will no longer run but attack him instead. They head to the enemy's base and stealthily falls down to invade Grimmel's tower. They make their way inside and part ways to look for the hunter. Hiccup goes upstairs and enters his room but finds that no one is inside. A cage suddenly falls around the dragon riders and Grimmel begins taunting them for getting captured by him. Hiccup asks why he smokes dragons, so he explains that when he was a boy he found a Night Fury and sent it to heaven. After doing this he became a hero, so he continued hunting them until they disappeared to bring peace to all his people that kept getting eaten and slaughtered by them. Hiccup points out that Grimmel has dragons too, and he reveals that they are actually dragon hunters that he controls with venom. He orders them to attack the dragon riders and they begin burning everything around them. They run for their lives, but Hiccup's mother manages to reach the top and calls for her dragon to lift up the cage so they can escape. But Hiccup was too slow, so he makes a leap of faith that somehow pays off, allowing them to escape Grimmel's trap while the wild dragon destroys his base. But it's revealed that Ruffnut got left behind. They return to their camp where they realize that she's missing. So Hiccup decides to call Toothless and return to the hunters. They tell him that Toothless might not be coming back, and Hiccup leaves to figure out what to do next. But Astrid lands in front of him to take him to find out where Toothless have been. Over at Grimmel's camp, we find Ruffnut using the secret art of being very annoying to antagonize her poor kidnapper. He decides that he's had enough and frees Ruffnut from the cell and gives her a baby dragon just so she can leave him alone. Back to the power couple. Astrid's dragon has led them to a giant gaping hole of glory and dives down to show them a whole new world that has a new fantastical point of view, with them seeing unbelievable sights, indescribable feelings while soaring through an endless diamond sky. They fly into the hidden world filled with dragons and begins to look around. He sees Toothless and his mate flying around until they land in the middle while the rest of the dragon praise their king for returning. They begin a marriage ceremony and bond together with their subjects as witness. Seeing that he's happy, Hiccup decides to leave, but he's confronted by a dragon that tries to eat them. They try their best to escape the dragons chasing them, but in the end Toothless comes to their rescue and brings them back to the camp. Hiccup tells his friend that he should go back to the hidden world without them, but Toothless notices that his wife followed him to the new Berk. Ruffnut arrives back to the camp and tells them that Grimmel let her go. They question if she was followed and runs over to Toothless. Luna flies up and gets darted out the sky, so her man heads to check on her, only to meet the same fate. Grimmel captures the two dragons and announces that he won, but the other dragons comes over to protect their king. Grimmel threatens his wife and forces Toothless to call off the attacking dragons, then leave the land of New Berk with all the dragons following their imprisoned king. Astrid goes over to the chief and finds him blaming himself for everything that happened. She tells him that she believes in him and says he is the greatest Viking there ever was, even without his dragon. He gives her some love and announces that they will head back to Grimmel and free all the captured dragons. The dragonless riders of Berk goes to test gravity and glides their way over to Grimmel's fleet of ships, while Toothless tells the dragons to free themselves from the cages. He turns to Grimmel to blast him away, but he barely manages to escape alive. Meanwhile, Astrid and Hiccup takes out the guards and perform a team ultimate to massacre everyone fighting below them. Astrid's dragon comes over to give Hiccup a lift, but he gets knocked off. Grimmel takes the chance to mount Toothless' wife and Hiccup goes to free his friend, but the trap begins to fall into the water. The dream team rises up and chase after Grimmel. They find him running in the skies, but can't attack without hurting Luna. The duo continues the chase and finds Grimmel's dragon smokers attacking from all sides. They begin to hold them down, so Toothless channels Black Force energy to give them a shocking surprise before appearing in front of Grimmel. He manages to dart Toothless while Hiccup knocks him off Luna, but he notices that his friend is falling and lets go so she can save Toothless from passing while dooming himself and Grimmel to fall damage. Luna comes in clutch, so he detaches his leg just before she saves him to make sure Grimmel does not survive. Everyone cheers for their victory while Hiccup hops over to make sure that his best friend is alright. He leaves him to his wife and watches as they embrace each other, but he realizes what he has to do. He heads over to tell Toothless that he must return to the hidden world with the other dragons so they can be safe. Everyone begins taking the saddles off their dragons and bids them farewell, as Toothless takes command of all of the dragons and carries them with him to go live inside the hidden world forever. They return to the land of Berk, where we find Hiccup and Astrid finally getting married while the Viking cheers for their everlasting happiness. Many years later, Hiccup, along with his son and daughter, travels the ocean where he sees Toothless and his family in the distance. He flies over to look who came and gets closer to see that his old friend has returned to him. Hiccup calls over his children and introduces them to Toothless. Then he takes them for a ride like he used to do in the old days, joined by his family, while Astrid reunites with her dragon to take it on one last ride through the skies.
Like for a cat girl, subscribe for a waifu, and remember to stay swifty.